also information technology. And today, Dr. Lu will be our speaker, sharing her expert opinion on relevance of accounting in a digital world. And my name is Brenda, who will accompany you all as the master of ceremony in today's seminar. Ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed to the seminar, I would like to read today's agenda. We will begin with an opening prayer, followed by a pretest, then an opening remarks from Professor Dr. Suharnomo as the Dean of Diponegoro University's Economics and Business Faculty. After that, an opening remarks from Dr. Pujiharto as the head of Indonesian Institute of Accounting, Central Java Accounting Educators Compartment. And then the sharing session with Dr. Lu, and there will be a post-test which has been prepared by the Accounting Forum Committee. So let us begin the seminar by praying to God Almighty based on our individual belief. Let us pray. Done. And next, there will be a pretest which can be accessed in a meeting chat, and all participants are required to do the pretest. And to the Accounting Forum Committee, you may share the link in the meeting chat now. Okay, while taking the pretest, I would like to welcome Professor Dr. Suharnomo as the Dean of Diponegoro University's Economic and Business Faculty to give an opening remarks. Please welcome Professor Dr. Suharnomo.
Terima kasih, Brenda. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good morning, everyone. When Pak Fuad asked me to give a speech in this accounting forum, I said, can I bring my speech in Bahasa Indonesia? Because it's very difficult for me to make a joke in English. And Pak Fuad said, no, sir, because this is international seminar and the speaker is very special from New Zealand. I said, can I bring it in Indonesian salad? Gado-gado, mix in English and Indonesia. I'll say, it's up to you, sir. Okay, thank you very much, Pak Fuad. Yeah. Because I have a bad experience using English when I make a joke. Like when I said so many I, one of participants said, I susu dibalas I tuba. Can you make a laugh for me? No. It's a joke, Professor Leo. Just a joke, and because a little bit poor English. Well, Pak Fuad always informed me that in accounting department, he has the accounting forum, monthly discussion, and he always informed me that event always improve capacity building for our students, our lecturer, and also practitioner. Welcome Pak Imam Ghazali, our senior lecturer in Faculty of Economics and Business, and some participants. And I think great, because we do need so many forums for us to increase our knowledge. Like now we are living in cutting edge of technology, I think, and so many changes happen, what we can call it as industrial revolution 4.0, changes in everywhere, not only in accounting, I think, but also in business and of course in finance, in every side of life. I think accounting will be different from the past and now, and accounting should adapt with the new technology, with something new. Yeah, what we can call it as industrial revolution. A very, very internet-based, very internet of the things. All happened in the past with traditional technology, I think will be left by us, and we are going forward with technology. Well, in this accounting forum, like Pak Fuad said, this is very special. We have a guest from University of Auckland, New Zealand, Dr. Angela Liu. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Liu. Hope that someday will visit us in Indonesia and enjoy the beauty of Indonesia. Have you ever visited Indonesia, Prof. Liu?
No. No, I've never been to Indonesia. I've only been next door to Malaysia.
So visit here because more beautiful than Malaysia, I think.
Yes, agree.
You should go the central Java, the heart of Java, the heart of Indonesia. So many old building here, Borobudur Temple, Prambanan Temple, and so many what we can call it as little Dutch in the east because we are colonized by Dutch at the time, and so many buildings, old building in Semarang City, Central Java. Well, for today, this is a very interesting issues. Like I told you that not only for accounting but also in finance and business, and hope that Prof. Liu will give the age of technological revolution that fundamentally changed the way we live, work, and socialize to one another. We believe that this forum particularly will be going and delivered by Dr. Liu will provide a great platform for further discussion in increasing the relevance of accounting in digital world. Particularly, discussion should be aimed to how accounting education should be reshaped so that the changes of accounting graduate competence per se can be developed. Okay, again, thank you very much, Professor Liu, for joining us. And thank you very much for all participants. Hope that someday you visit our great campus with more than 50,000 students. The third in Indonesia for population, 53,000 students. The biggest, one of the biggest in Indonesia, and one of the best in Indonesia also, of course. Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor Liu and all participants, and I will close my remark with pantun. Mike Tyson naik kayu makan putu. Cukup sekian, thank you dan I love you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Pak Rekan.
Oke, Pak Fuad.
Thank you, Pak ya. Makasih ya.
Oke, bye.
Bye, Pak.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Suharnomo, for the opening remarks. After that, another opening remarks will be delivered by Dr. Pujiharto as the head of Indonesian Institute of Accountant, Central Java Accounting Educators Compartment. Please welcome Dr. Pujiharto.
Unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Pak.
Okay. Very good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here.
Can you speak louder, Pak Puji?
Okay. Thank you. I would like to welcome Prof. Suharnomo as the Dean of Faculty of Economics and Business. Very funny person. Okay, and thank you also Pak Fuad and also Dr. Angela Liu. Thank you for joining with us. It is a wonderful day today. I appreciate this webinar, and this is one example of good collaboration between university and accounting profession. I represent Indonesian Institute of Accountants. Yeah.
Louder, Pak.
Yeah.
Louder now.
Mr. Hendri Setiawan as the chairman of Institute of Indonesian Institute of Accountant that's present here, but he is regret cannot join us today, and he sent warm regard to all the participants. And we are thank you for the good collaboration between the university and the accounting profession, and hope that we can develop more networking, more collaboration in the near future.
Not very clear, Pak Puji.
Yeah.
Not very clear. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And for this webinar, I think it is very relevant webinar, and the topic is very good, and the relevance of accounting in a digital world. because now we are facing a very dynamic environmental changing and environmental uncertainty, because now suddenly we in the middle of and then we also facing the US.
Pak Puji, we cannot hear from you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
that's much
honestly
better.
better.
Okay,
Yeah.
much better. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Something wrong with my headset. Okay.
Yeah.
I think this is a very relevant webinar. And now we are in the middle of something issues like blockchain, artificial intelligence, yeah, robotic processing, automations, and I hope that we are as a accountant can can deal with the changing of that the digital technology, and we can apply in our profession. I think that's all from me. And once again, I would like to thanks to all the participants and committee with this good collaboration. And with that, I would like to close my opening speech and hope we can enjoy the speech from Dr. Angelo Liu. Thank you, Pak Fuad.
Okay, thank you, Babuji. Thank you, Pak.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Pujiato, for the opening remarks. Next, our special guest, Dr. Lu, is about to share valuable material for all of us, and it is to be moderated by Dr. Fuad. So please give your full attention to this session. Without any further ado, please welcome Dr. Fuad and Dr. Lu.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Brenda.
Yes.
Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I would like to welcome you all. Particularly, I would like to welcome our special speaker today, Dr. Angela Liu from University of Auckland Business School, and also to all of you, to all the lecturers from Department of Accounting Universitas Diponegoro, and particularly thank you, Pak Dekan, Prof. Suarnomo, for the opening remarks. Very nice, very flourishing opening remarks. And also to all the participants. And today on this one of our accounting forum series, particularly today, we have received more than 1,000 registrations. But we have to close the registration, and we hope that more people will be able to join our accounting forum series, and I hope that the presence of the posters will not will not make the audience to feel reluctant to join our accounting forum series, as the questions of the posters will be very easy, just to make sure that the free riders are definitely not accepted in our accounting forum series. And today we are going to discuss a very important issue, very hot issue, particularly regarding the relevance of accounting in the digital world. And this important issue, this special issue, will be shared or will be discussed with Dr. Angela Liu from University of Auckland Business School. And there is none other speaker as fit as Dr. Liu, because I would like to spend a minute or two just to share with you her short biography. Dr. Liu is a senior lecturer in accounting and finance at the University of Auckland Business School. And interestingly, she has a dual academic background and professional experience in not only in accounting but also in information technology as well. And her research focused largely on the use and the effects of information technology in business. So very interesting, right? So she also is the lead researcher of a current large-scale qualitative research study on the future of accounting work that examines the human impacts of automation and artificial intelligence in commercial and accounting firms. And she has also numerous publications not only in accounting but also in information system as well, such as the publication in International Journal of Accounting Information System, DSS, Decision Computer Systems, Computers and Industrial Engineering, and so on and so forth. And she also the visiting lecturer, visiting researcher at the UNSW in Sydney, and the Copenhagen Business School in Denmark, and the University of Tampere in Finland. And she also one of the great lecturer. She was awarded 5 teaching excellence over the years at different levels at the University of Auckland, 2 at the department, 2 at the business schools, and another at the university level. And I think that is just a short biography from Dr. Angela Liu. And if I have to read all her biography, it will take additional 10 minutes. And I don't really think we can afford to have extra 10 minutes. All right, I think without further ado, just would like to invite Dr. Liu. Dr. Liu, can we start the presentation? Perhaps, yeah, the time is yours. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you, Fuad.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. And looks like everyone's quite interested in this particular topic and how the world is changing with technology. So I'm going to start sharing all the PowerPoint slides so you can see the screen as well as we go through and talk about it. Right. So as you see, when we talk about the digital world, there's always a robot involved, and there's always the hand between the robots and the humans there. So that becomes the interesting point of where we're going. So in the industry revolution, there have been 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0. And I think the main point is really to understand what's the difference between 3.0 and 4.0, which is what we're sort of seeing and experiencing quite a fair bit. Pretty much both 3.0 and 4.0 are both to do with computing. The only difference is the 4.0, which is where we are today, is not just the pure computing as such, but we're moving into the intelligence space. And the whole idea of the intelligence is to do with how interconnected the world is. For example, the Internet of Information. So there's a lot of data out there. The Internet of Things. So we start connecting with each other through all sorts of sensors and devices. And the Internet of Trust, because now we have all sorts of issues to do with privacy and data breaches. So this is basically where we're at in terms of Industry 4.0. There are a lot of things, there are a lot of movement, but things have moved on since 3.0 in terms of computing, in terms of automation. Now, when we talk about automation, it has a completely different meaning than what we looked at back in 3.0. I thought I'll start with the first little thing of what is in your mind when you hear about the word robot. So I thought I'd just ask everyone to just stop and think about that. What do you think about when I mention the word robot? Now I'm going to put in a poll right now, which you'll see 4 options. And what I'm going to show you is a picture of 4 different robots that most people might think about. So what would your answer be? Hopefully you've picked an answer, and looks like we might have quite a competition there, but it's clearly a particular favorite among these 4 robots. So quickly pick your votes, and we're going to stop in a few seconds. Right. So it turns out that when we talk about robots, the most favorite one is actually picture number C, the little cute little robot. Having said that, picture A and B are quite high up there and equally to picture D. And if anyone's seen the movie Terminator, they probably associate the word robot with the picture A. Now, let me tell you the story about each of these robots, because all 4 are correct answers. They are what we see in terms of robots in today's world. And I'll go through and talk about each one. So what is happening with the digital future in our everyday lives? What is happening in our lives? Basically, our lives are full of machines, full of some gadgets. I hate to ask, but I'm sure everyone in this room, in this webinar, has a cell phone, and the phone tends to be a smartphone instead of a dumb phone. Now, as we use this particular smartphone, most of you would have had to use the GPS system. For example, Google Map, to navigate yourself in terms of driving through and finding your way around. Now, is the Google Map or whatever Wave or whatever device, whatever app you are using, is that correct or not? That's still questionable and debatable, but at the same time, the point is, can we actually navigate and drive without any GPS guidance? I don't know what the situation is in Indonesian university, but in overseas, in Australia and New Zealand, lecture recordings is one of those things is becoming more common. It's an everyday thing. But the problem with that is, can we actually do note-taking, summarizing it without actually transcribing word by word what the presenter is actually talking about? Can we capture the essence of the talk without pausing and actually transcribing through? I think most importantly, can we actually stay focused on a lengthy conversation without actually hitting the pause button? So these are what technology is doing in our everyday lives when it comes to a recording or even an online seminar, because I'm sure most people would ask not to go to a live webinar, but they want to go to a recorded webinar instead. And part of the reason is they like the flexibility and the ability to hit the pause button so that they can stop, because they can't concentrate for a long period of time. Now, when it comes to the interaction or to deal with customer services, in our everyday lives, we are dealing with machines and chatbots. But I have a question for you. Given the choice, do you prefer to speak to a human or a robot? And sometimes that answer actually changes depending on what circumstance or what question or what interaction you wish to get out of it. Because sometimes if it's faster for you to get attended to because you're talking to a robot, instead of waiting 1 hour or 2 hours for a human, then you might actually change your choice option. Now, where are we at in terms of machines and chatbots, for example? The advancement of the chatbot's been moving quite quickly and rapidly, at least in the last few years. And we're really talking about the last 3 to 5 years. It's been quite a big change and big improvement. 3 particular areas, I will talk about it in that sense. The first one is the one that most of us are most familiar with, which is textual and written words, where we type. So this chatbot is what we call chat by typing. The next one that's been quite popular even in overseas, in the US airlines, they've been using this for more than 10 years now, which is an audio chatbot. So you could actually get servers and get assistant by audibly giving the instruction and telling the answer, and it will be dealt with accordingly. More recently, we have agents with facial expressions where they could actually understand whether you're getting angry or you're getting happy, or if you have no reaction at all. And that's basically where the facial expression comes in. So when we talk about the advancement of chatbots, we've basically moved from a rules base to a more machine learning train base in terms of what the chatbots is able to do. I'd like you to meet our new digital workforce, either called digital humans or digital people. These are two particular agents that you see in front of you. They are not real, but they are completely make-believe in the sense that they are chatbots. They are look-alike, and you could see, for example, the female police there, you could see freckles on her face, so she looks just like a real human. And the other person is a different company that produce what we call digital people. So different companies use different names, but they basically are new digital colleagues, shall we say. And that's the form of where chatbots have been moving to. I'd like to take a moment to pause and just ask everyone to think about it in terms of why did you choose accounting as a major or as a profession? Just stop and think about it and see if you can come up with an answer as to why you chose that in the first place. Now, in one of the studies that we're currently doing that was based on the work readiness of accounting graduates in their first chartered accountancy job, we asked them the question, what are the challenges and struggles you have had in the first 24 months of starting work? And we've basically been focusing on the what we call the top firms in terms of the big four, plus a few of the mid-tier firms. So let's look at what they explain in terms of their challenges and struggles that they've had to sort of overcome. I think the first one was quite an interesting one, is the need to be self-motivated and self-disciplined, waking up early in the morning, going to work, having enough sleep, having the social and the communication skills because they need to talk to clients, they need to have small talks, and they need to build that relationship and rapport because they can't just give an instruction and somebody will give them the things that they require correctly. And the third thing that was coming across quite loud is the fact that they have to learn a lot of new things and they have to learn very, very fast. And it was quite interesting. They talk about, I didn't know that Excel could do so many things. I forgot my mouse when I went away overseas for a 2-week trip, and I had to learn how to use Excel without a mouse. And I think that was also interesting that there are so many smart people that work here. So I feel like I'm probably the dumbest compared to all the other smart people in the office that I have to deal with. And yet there's so much to learn in every single aspect, and we're only talking about an accounting firm. Among these people that talk about the challenges and struggle, when we asked them why did they choose accounting as a major and profession, what was interesting is their answers. I was good at the subject when I was back in secondary school. I like the numbers and the calculations. I want to sit behind the desk because I don't like talking to people. And when you look at that and compare to some of the challenges and struggle, you can see why there is a problem. So in many students' mind, taking accounting and working in accounting as a profession is to do with calculating the numbers. But Excel could do that. And all sorts of machines and robots can do that much quicker and much faster and much more accurately. So there is a mismatch between what we think accounting is and what is accounting in reality. Let's look at what's happening in the accounting profession right now. Accounting is no longer just a job. The role is changing and widening. So what is accounting 20 years ago is no longer accounting today. It's not the main thing. It's the small thing. Accountants are no longer required to do any accounting work. We've got accounting software such as Xero that allows non-accountants to use it and do all the work. But the most important thing that you need to know, money is still there, but money is changing its forms and shapes. It's becoming more digital. So how are we going to count money when it's no longer in notes, in coins, and it's completely in a different form? And I guess the thing is, the future is not about being an accountant anymore when we study accounting. I think most importantly, a lot of people say, I can't find accounting jobs, I can't find accountants. That's because nobody used the job title of accountants anymore. So it's disappearing. But instead, they are coming out with new titles called business analyst and business partner instead. I think the most important thing that to remind everyone is accounting no longer requires the expertise of accountants anymore, because robots and machines and all the other things could actually provide enough expertise and advice. So that's why accountants are actually being replaced in that sense. Let's look more at what is happening. And this time we're going to focus a little bit about the audit side of things in terms of what is happening in the big four firms in New Zealand, for example. I think most importantly, when we talk about annual reporting, because that's what auditors are all interested in, is the fact that auditing now in terms of annual reporting is not just about numbers. And that's when the new term integrated reporting is being mentioned more and more, because we've got a lot of other non-financial numbers that needs to be reported. The auditors, the financial audit teams are using more and more data analytics tool. And when they use data analytics tool, they are actually using beyond Excel to conduct their audit work, and instead of the old-fashioned sampling tests. So that sort of thing is actually happening and is actually changing. Not 100%, but still going towards that direction in terms of replacing the sampling tests instead. And it's becoming very clear that as accounting graduates enter the big four firms, they need a much stronger digital acumen and digital fluency to keep up with the fast pace of changes. I will come back to talk a little bit more about what exactly are these digital terminologies we're talking about. I think most importantly is to understand and appreciate audit is no longer just the traditional financial audit. It's diversifying into a variety of internal audits. And these so-called internal audits are appearing in terms of IT audits, cybersecurity audit, data audit, health and safety audit, food safety audit, process audit, automation audit, and you name it, there will be more to be added onto this list, even in 12 months' time. And the other thing that becomes quite interesting from that point of view of financial audit, which is still recruiting graduates, is they're struggling to attract graduates and struggling to retain them. Why? Because everyone thinks of audit being over time, lots and lots of it, and that the workload is quite high and quite busy at times. And so a lot more graduates around the world is desiring better work-life balance, and that causes a lot of issues within financial audit, for example. I guess the other thing is becoming more and more interesting is the daily audit work. As far as the graduates starting, they think it's quite mundane and boring tasks. And because it feels so boring, they don't find it interesting or exciting to enter into this particular field in terms of audit. And so we have a lot of new issues that we need to think about, because now the world is filled with more and more exciting and interesting things because of the machines and the robots. So people have, as in graduates, have different expectation than what the world is 20 years ago. If we look at the pace of change taking place in Big Four globally, one thing to sort of understand is most of the Big Four's headquarters tend to be in UK, US. So when a change needs to happen, it tends to start there first. So that's the first point of call. So between the US and the UK, the changes will happen somewhere there. And after the changes been rolled out, they start moving across to Europe. And from Europe, it may start trickling down and move across to Australia. And after it's been in Australia, then it starts moving to New Zealand. So what you're seeing in New Zealand right now has already gone through a different cycle. And obviously different geographical zone has slightly different issue to do with that. And then from there, after New Zealand, it tends to probably move into the Southeast Asia, and then from there moving up to the rest of the East Asia and other countries. Now, obviously, that movement or change may vary depending on which company we're actually dealing with within the Big Four firms. And one thing to note is most of the Big Four firms are headquarters in UK and US. So PwC, Deloitte, EY. So a lot of the reports that are talking about audit happening in UK or US, that's something we want to pay attention to because eventually those issues will come down to us. As for KPMG, their headquarters is actually stationed in Netherlands in Europe. So the effect is slightly different in terms of the order of the change moving through. And the other thing to note is within the different zone, there may be one or two countries, for example, Singapore within the Southeast Asia, they may get a much faster upgrade or changing over before some other zone instead. So something to just to bear in mind, these changes flow through. So what you may not see happening in Southeast Asia today may be happening next week or next month. So it's a matter of time. The only question is how quickly and how soon. Once upon a time, we may think of it as being several years, but now, because of Industry 4.0, because of the interconnectivity, that change is shortened quite quickly. So it's a matter of no more than 12 to 18 months, you could expect something to change in your zone, in your country, where somewhere else is already happened and had that change. And potentially it could be shortened to less than 12 months. What are the accounting professional bodies are saying? Now, what is interesting is since last year, 2019, a lot of the professional accounting bodies are reconsidering their curriculum and saying what they need to consider, what they shouldn't consider, or what are the things they need to incorporate or change the curriculum or change the exam. So there's a lot of rethink about what needs to go into the accounting curriculum. So let's look at some of the bigger ones in the what we call the Asia Pacific region, for example, ACCA, CPA Australia, and also Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand. Basically, a consistent message is some level of literacy, digital literacy is required, no doubt, and regardless where work is, accounting or not accounting. But what does digital literacy actually means? It means the ability to identify and use the technology confidently and creatively and critically. What we're really talking about is learning how to use one piece of software and use it. And that's as simple as that. We know that every single job will require interacting with machines and robots. And when we talk about in the whole entire accounting sector, that is true. The only question is, what sort of robots are we seeing? I think the most important thing to also realize is all the accounting bodies are recognizing that accounting graduates require both data skills and digital skills. But what do they mean by that? What is also interesting is learning will be lifelong. So if you hate your exams, guess what? There will be more exams to come for the rest of your life. So what the whole change in education is, learning is no longer restricted the first few years of university studies and getting your professional qualification, but you have to keep learning and keep studying and keep up with what's going on. What is also interesting is businesses are undergoing a lot of digital transformation. If they haven't done so, they will be undergoing those transformation very soon. If they don't do that, they may not be around for more than a few years. And we know they're not likely to be around for 5 years, but it's a matter of how long can they survive without transforming. Which comes down to how much digital do we need to be? The accounting bodies are saying you need digital fluency and digital acumen. We talk about literacy, someone who knows these tools and how to use them. Fluency means someone who could take these tools and use them at the appropriate time and place for a desired effect, which means it has to be applied. It's no longer, there is a function called sum, and at some point, I just need to know to use it, and I need to be told when to use it. When it comes to fluency, I need to know which tool, which button, which what functionality are useful and at what time. So I need to go to the next level of applying. Digital acumen, thinking digitally all the way. Not just about applying digital tools, but in terms of how to make use of these digital tools to drive the decision-making process of a company. All the way, digitally all the way, not just in one instance, in one time, a point in time. So let's come back and look at data skills. What exactly do they mean by data skills? And one of the most popular terms that's been talked about over and over again, this term called data analytics. One thing to remember, data analytics are actually being organized in 3 distinct steps. Unfortunately, most people tend to mistake it to mean only one of the steps. Data analytics actually have 3 completely different steps, and all 3 steps needs to be completed to complete the whole data analytics. First one, data wrangling, the cleaning of and manipulating of raw data. This is probably the one that most people know about. So when people talk data analytics, they tend to talk about how much time it takes them to clean and manipulate and tidy up the data on hand. You probably don't see the word wrangling being mentioned too often because people tend to use the word data analytics to mean data wrangling. The second one is data analysis. It's actually analyzing the clean data. Now, when we look at data wrangling and data analysis, both these steps tend to be used using the same tools. Excel is probably the most common one. It's always been used. There are some other tools instead of Excel that you could use, for example, IDEA. But IDEA is something that was quite popular among only accounting and auditing, and that was popular for the last 10 to 20 years, especially in the US. But now we're moving into an era where we call Excel on steroid. We completely move out of Excel. It's far more powerful and it has far more capabilities than Excel. We can come back and talk about why people prefer to use something else other than Excel. There's a good reason for that. And the third step is this thing called data visualization, the picturing of the meaningful data. And you may hear the word Power BI by Microsoft. That's quite commonly being mentioned in the media, Tableau, and also Click. These are data visualization tools. They're not your usual bar graph pie charts. It's getting more sophisticated. You can click on it, you can drag on it, you can move it, you could go in and look at it further, narrow it down and look at details far more than before. So it's not a two-dimensional, but three-dimensional and also interactive. And that's where the data analytics world, in terms of visualizing the data that I have, is becoming more and more powerful. Right now, data analytics is not used to its fullest because we're spending 90% of the time cleaning the data. So it's still pretty much stuck at the data wrangling state. But if we manage to get over that hurdle and get things much more smoother, then we should be spending far more time in terms of doing data visualization so that we can make more meaning of what the data is telling us by able to see it in the picture. After all, a picture paints 1,000 words. So remember, Excel has always been the most common data analytics tools for many, many years. It could have been better used, but students still don't know what Excel could be used for. And that's still quite common problems across the whole entire accounting sector. People are only probably using 10 to 20% of the functionality of what Excel can do. So we need to know more of it so that we can learn more of it. For example, learning more about Excel macro and VBA to make our standard Excel much more powerful in that sense. However, because of Industry 4.0, because of interconnectivity of the world, because we've got so many sensors and so many collection points, we've gathered more and more data to the point we call big data. We've got too much data. Excel can't handle. Excel starts crashing. So that's why we move beyond the Excel. We start moving into what we call the Excel on steroids, because those could handle a bigger volume of data that the world is seeing today and don't know what to do with them. But I think most importantly, when we look at data analytics, one thing to understand is right now we're still manually going through and doing things. So imagine if you have to repeat each of these 3 steps manually every day or every hour in order to visualize the data you have received. That will be quite painful, because what we want and what the world is expecting is one click of a button, everything is done, and I can look at the data and go, this is what it means. But how do we get to that one click? And this is where automation comes into play. Using machines and robots to do the work instead of using people. Once upon a time, we talk about automation in the factories. Now we talk about automation in our office, in our everyday work. Automation exists in many forms, and I have to say, this list is changing and will be out of date in a few months' time. One of the new terms that's come out quite a fair bit in 2020 is this notion of data automation. We want to automate the whole data analytics process. And what is also interesting that in the last couple of months, there's another term that the data analytics people are starting to make use of that's called analytics process automation. Now, how does the analytics process automation come about? Simple, because process automation is probably the biggest known automation within the office space in terms of back office work. What it means when we talk about process automation is automating the individual work activities. And the most common one that more and more of you may read in the newspaper is robotic process automation. Now, robotic process automation is different from analytics process automation. The difference is being analytics process automation has the data component to it. So it's a mixture. Whereas the robotic process automation really focuses on the process and the activities, not so much on the data side. Now, besides robotic process automation, there is also another term, but that's not as popular. It's called robotic desktop automation. That means it is not an enterprise version where the whole entire firm gets the same robot. It is just a robot sitting on your desk, which you have created for yourself. So you might hear terms that says a robot for every employee, a robot for every student, a robot for every person. They are talking about robotic desktop automation. And a very good example of robotic desktop automation is actually Excel Macro, Excel VBA. Besides process automation, which is probably the most popular one, there's also another one that's becoming a little bit mentioned a little bit. That's probably not known so much, but it's to do with workflow automation. What it's doing is automating the flow of the tasks, the documents, basically the movement. But just bear in mind, most things tends to be process automation that we are seeing and talking about and hearing as well. Besides the process automation that is quite popular, there's also another one that's becoming more and more popular. And I could basically say if RPA, as in robotic process automation, is a big hit this year in 2020, 2021 is all about the next one, intelligent automation, IA. IA is not the same as AI. IA is an in-between where it combines RPA and AI. So what it's trying to do is trying to get a little bit smarter, a little bit more cognitive in terms of just the robotic process automation. I would think of robotic process automation being a robot without a brain, and intelligent automation means a robot with a bit more brain than the usual. And then when we move into AI, it's the robot with a full functioning brain, better than you and me. So what are the technologies enhancing the humans? What's happening there? What could we become? What could we build? We basically could become a global citizen because the technology is interconnecting us with the rest of the world. You're much more interconnected within, for example, within Indonesia than you did ever before. But now you're also interconnected with the rest of the world. And it's very difficult to hide a particular piece of news, whether real or fake, it will spread quite quickly. It allows us to become a global citizen. We're no longer a citizen in a small town. We know what is going on around the world because that's what technology allowed us to do. Now, what technology has also allowed us to become is what we call citizen data scientists. Citizen data scientist is not the same as expert data scientist. That means we just need to know the bare minimum so that we could survive, but we don't claim to be an expert. That's what citizen data scientist means. What technology also allowed us to do is become citizen developers, enabling non-programmers to code without coding. So you hear new terms such as low code, no code. Those are designed for people like you who have no programming background and still be able to program. And that's what Excel Macro was supposed to achieve, except Excel Macro wasn't as powerful. But now we've got tools through the robotic process automation space that allows someone to become a developer without knowing how to code. Now that's quite a game changer in itself. Which also means with all these technology we have with us, we can essentially build a completely new digital worker, our own little colleague, a little helper to help us. Doesn't have to help anyone else, it can help us. Or the whole company could build a whole multitude in terms of the whole workforce, a digital workforce. All the different robots could help do things that the human employees would otherwise be doing, which means it could take away all the mundane, boring jobs away from the humans and let humans do much more exciting and interesting jobs. So that's one potential in terms of what technologies could deliver to us at the meantime. I think the biggest thing to understand about the whole digitalness and the digital world and the digital future is really about the speed of change. The speed of change in the adoption of the advanced technology, the potentials. How much do you know about the potentials and what is out there in terms of what we talk about in terms of technology? But I think the most important thing, be careful about the effects. It has positive effects as well as negative effects in there. So speed of change, what is interesting is actually changing the accounting standards far more faster than it ever had before in the past. Taxation is a very interesting one because now, because of government changing the way tax are going to take place and making use of advanced technology to do so, it is actually pushing that across the whole entire accounting sector in terms of how to manage and handle tax. Employment law, what are you going to do with all these issues when we've got technologies? And we also have other issues to do with privacy. And how do you monitor your staff member, or are you allowed to monitor staff member or not, in terms of emails, in terms of what activities you are doing on your computer? When we come to potentials, I think the simplest question to ask every one of us in the audience, what else do you know besides Excel? Do you know the different terms? Have you heard of the different softwares that I've even mentioned today? Now, when we talk about the effects, I started talking about smartphones. I started talking about GPS. I started talking about chatbots. What does that mean to an ordinary human being in terms of a daily worker? Well, it's changing the tasks that we have to do as part of our work. And because of the changes of the tasks that are on hand, it could cause quite a few of us to lose our job because there are fewer need to be done because the robots can do a few more things for us. What is also interesting because of technology is the fact that some of these work, accounting work or whatever work, could actually go to somewhere else. Now, in Southeast Asia, Philippines is probably the most well-known country in terms of providing offshoring service. So imagine that. If I want to keep my costs low, I send it overseas to somewhere else near enough to do the work for me. So that's where the offshoring happens. But what is interesting now, with all the improvement and the advancement of technology, we're starting to see a new phenomenon in terms of reshoring, where we're getting the work back from Philippines, for example. Now, some of you might say, Philippines, what about India? India is known worldwide in terms of offshoring work, and it's still quite well known. But what is interesting is every geographical zone for the big four firms, they actually have a little offshore center within their geographical zone to allow different countries to consider to cut costs or to reduce costs to send it off to another country. And they would not be able to do that if it wasn't because of the advancement of technologies that we have today. Which means that where do you go look for work? That becomes quite interesting. Which country will have more jobs opportunities? I think the most important thing for the bosses up there is there will be a lot of power loss because a lot of things can be done by the machines, by the robots. But clearly, because of the advancement, how do we deal with people? How do we retrain them? How do we upskill them? How do we get them ready to the next phase? And I think that every now and then you'll see in the newspaper, some company have got themselves into trouble because they've had a data privacy problem. There've been a data breaches. There's been a cybersecurity attack and their data have been leaked out. And what do you do with that? And there's a lot of reputation at stake for companies when that happens. And these are all because of technologies, what it can do and provide for us. Now, we talk about a lot of the digital advancement in terms of Industry 4.0. I thought it'd be quite interesting to just give a sort of a quick update to say, hey, you know, we've learned about the humanless factories, the internet connectivities, factories are changing. It's been changing for a long time. It's really been changing for the last 10 to 20 years. It's not new. But I thought what might be interesting is we look at farms. One of my little pet hobby was looking at farms as in fishing farms. And I know in Indonesia and basically most countries in Southeast Asia, fish farms, those are quite an important one because it's to do with our food supply. And what is interesting is when we talk about sea farms or fish farms, there are quite a variety. Land-based, sea cage, open ocean, but what does that mean? Especially when we come to technology involved. So let's stop and think about one particular fish, salmon. So I'm sure some of you would have seen or eaten salmon. It's quite common when you go to a Japanese restaurant with sushi and sashimi. So let's look at the development in this particular salmon farms. In Denmark, they do a lot of land farming. So they recycle all the water inside. But what is interesting when we look at the Denmark salmon farm situation is we're looking at the factory. So imagine fishing as an inside a factory, large scale. And this particular salmon farm that's still under construction, you could see the rings are not small, they're quite big. So let's look at a bigger view where this is another Danish on-land salmon farm. And you can see it's next to the seaside and you can see how big and huge this whole factory is. So next time when you buy another piece of salmon that's arrived from Denmark, this is where it's come from, inside a factory in a tank. Now, when we look at other fish farms of salmon farm, for example, New Zealand, this is a typical New Zealand salmon farm, at least by one of the particular largest salmon fish producer. One thing to note is you could see the sea, but you could also see a bit of land behind. That means it is by a bay, it's surrounded, it's quite nicely tucked, it's out in the sea, but it's on the coast. You still have to get there by going through a water taxi, for example. It's still quite a distance from the land, but it's quite sheltered. And the whole reason of being sheltered is because they can put the sea cage in there. So this is what technology allows you to do, for example. But one thing I want to say is because of the things that the world is experiencing, for example, climate change, the seawater, in terms of temperature in the seawater, is rising. And so the condition of raising these salmon in these coastal sea farms are actually not viable anymore. And they have to start considering new options. And this is what the UK salmon producer have been thinking about. And they've actually done that. So they move out to the open ocean. Now here you can see a picture of an ocean with no land to be seen. So imagine you having to farm your fish out in the open ocean with no protection from the wave, from all sorts of sea creatures and etc. So new issues to be considered. So a lot of technology assistance needs to be there and you need to monitor it because it's no longer a 40 minutes water taxi ride to reach your sea farm, but it's a much more longer sort of time to get out to the open ocean to reach your farm. So that's quite interesting in terms of this is changing in businesses. If the businesses are all changing, what's happening in accounting? We are changing as well because we are changed because of all the changes that others are experiencing. Which comes down to the next question. Why do I need to know about automation? Why is automation relevant to accounting? Robotic process automation is probably the most common topic within the automation space. Why? So in this particular study that was done recently by a particular firm, overseas, they've looked at the functional areas in which robotic process automation is being deployed. Now you can see different areas within a business sector, within a business division. For example, in accounting, what we call finance, human resource and IT, supply chain, talent management in terms of recruiting, sales and marketing, procurement, buying of items, customer services, manufacturing, and other. So if you stop and think about all these different divisions inside a company and across all different businesses, which functional areas has RPA been deployed the most? Guess what? 74% of RPA work that's being deployed, being administered, is actually in the accounting division, what we call the finance. And everyone else, the next highest one is 30% is in HR, which means accounting needs to catch up and understand RPA and understand robotic process automation, because we are being automated. We are having robots next to us. The only question is, do you know if you are interacting with a robot, or you think you are still interacting with a human? Which comes down to the famous question, do I need to learn coding and programming? I don't want to become a programmer. I just want to be an accountant. The world's changing. We need to learn because we need to know. We're not learning in order to become a programmer, which means we need to learn very simple things. If we could do an Excel VBA and an Excel, very simple things in terms of what is a condition, what is a loop in terms of what is being repeated. If we could just know those very basic things, then at least we know how to communicate and describe what is our work and how to make our work more efficient, so that we could be in the front rather than being behind or being replaced by all these wonderful robots. So unless you understand what a robot can do, otherwise chances are you will be replaced by a robot if you don't understand what a robot can do for you. So I guess the basic question, or the simple question to ask again, how much do you know about Excel? And do you know about anything other than Excel? So something to think about in that sense. And when we come to what do we need to know when we talk about accounting competencies in the world? Well, guess what? We're dealing with a digital world. And I'm saying nearly every accounting bodies that actually made a statement recently in 2019 or 2020 are saying and emphasizing how important technology is and how a digital mindset is needed. Those two things have to come together, and both are needed because you need them both in order to survive and thrive in a digital world. And my most favorite diagram that talks about accounting competency among all the different accounting bodies is this one by CIMA, by the Management Accounting Group. It has put digital skill right in the center of anything and everything. You can have the technical accounting skill, but that needs to be complemented by all the business skills. That needs to be complemented by all your people skills in terms of talking to people and interacting with people, and also eventually leading. But you need that digital skills all across different levels of your career. So what is the world seeking among accounting graduates then? Well, because the world is changing and it requires more and more knowledge, this is what they're looking for. They're looking for graduates with a more inter or multidisciplinary mindset beyond just accounting. The reason being you need a bit more specialty domain knowledge because most firms are becoming more and more complicated. So you need to have a bit more understanding of it. So do you understand enough chemistry to understand a pharmacy company? Do you understand enough of simple things in terms of something to manage, for example, food science in order to manage food-related companies? Those are all businesses and they all need to be managed. They all need to deal with money and they all need to deal with how to make the company more profitable. The world is also seeking accounting graduates with digital fluency and digital acumen, not just the digital literacy anymore, with the ability to learn and learn fast. And I emphasize self-learn. You have to learn it on your own. There won't be anyone holding your hands and telling you what you need to learn and when you need to learn. You need to have quite strong soft skills. You can't hide behind a computer screen anymore unless you don't want to get the promotion, unless you don't want to move on in your career, unless you want to always be ready to be replaced by a robot. And because there are fewer and fewer number of jobs available because things could be automated, there is an abundance supply of humans. So you can't just meet the expectation. You have to exceed the expectation. You have to do better than what the minimum is. And that becomes quite challenging. So you have to exceed expectation. You have to achieve exceptional performance if you don't want to be replaced, if you want to be highly considered. And basically summarizing them, you need the accounting, you need the specialty domain knowledge, you need the soft skill, but most importantly, you also need the digital factor. So remember, every single job will require you to interact with a machine or robots. The challenge is whether you can recognize you are actually dealing with one of the robots. Traditional accounting tasks are being automated, and that's where the robots are. So the robots are doing work and you don't even realize that's what a robot is. So the robots doesn't need to have a body. It only needs an arm. And that was why I had the picture of a robot with only a hand, an arm to do the work. It's giving you a helping hand. It doesn't have to exist in the whole entire body. Our job competition. Once upon a time, we're competing with our classmate from our university as we graduate. Now we're competing with the machines and the robots. So what can you do that the robots can't do? If all you know and all you care about is how to calculate, the robots can do it better and more accurately and faster. Remember, studying technology is not about becoming a developer or a programmer anymore. Studying accounting is not about becoming an accountant anymore. Why? Because accounting is the language of business. If you understand accounting, you understand what the issues are when you're managing a business. Because accounting helps us understand what is the financial situation of one's company or one's situation and be able to solve its problem. If you don't understand the situation, how are you going to solve the problem that you are in? You need to have a better understanding of the business processes and managing the risk of all these facets. It is no longer about reporting the numbers and the financial. It's about accounting for the future performance and the future directions and the future, if there is a future in this particular business. And most importantly, as we've seen in this whole crisis and pandemic of COVID-19, cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. If we don't have cash flow working in the company and just money sitting in the books, this company cannot continue to operate. It will be getting into a lot of trouble very, very soon. And so we're seeing more and more companies shutting down and going into bankruptcy and people losing jobs because the company can't sustain. Cash flow is king, not just money in the books. Once again, digital skills is in the center. So besides the technical skills, you remember you need to have the digital skills, you need to have the business skills, you need to have the people skills, and you need to have the leadership skills if you want to move up, further up in the hierarchy and the career rank and the staircase. The future of work, a very popular topic and term that you would have seen in the newspaper and media. It's been around for pretty much about a good 5 to 6 years now. It's probably extremely popular in the last 2-3 years. Almost every newspaper has been talking about it. May I remind you, the future of work is not in the future. Not anymore. The future of work is already here. And it was already here yesterday, and it remains here today. And it will be looking completely different tomorrow, next week, next month, or next year. I hope that was a good little introduction and summary as to what is going on and where is the relevance of accounting and the digital world. Thank you very much. Any questions?
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Liu. Very nice presentation. Very, wow, very eye-opening, actually. No wonder you were awarded with 5 teaching excellences. Very, very good presentation. Very nice. And actually, there are 2 types of discussion that I would like to make here. You can write the questions in the group chat here using the Zoom group chat, or you can have an interactive discussion with Dr. Liu. And I just received a question from AKN2 Gunawan. How to change people's minds to keep updates with the technology when they are already in the comfort zone and don't want to change, especially for people who lives in the traditional accounting area. So basically the question is about change the people perceptions that, oh, it's just a hoax. There is not much of changes needed in order to to face the future. So yeah, perhaps you can give us some thoughts about this, Dr. Liu.
My immediate response, and I'm a bit concerned that I'm going to get myself into political problem here, is my immediate response is I feel like people who don't want to change because they think it's a hoax is no different than Donald Trump saying that there is no COVID-19, there's no coronavirus, there's no such thing. Unfortunately, that is very difficult. As you can see in chatbots, in the world of chatbots in terms of customer services, and if we look at even fish farming, very simple, ordinary, traditional business, they have to change. If all these traditional businesses have to change, why isn't accounting excluded? That's probably the easiest one. Every other business have been affected by technology and have to move with technology. And fish farming, yes, you can carry on to do your fishing the old-fashioned way, but you're not going to get the big volume of fish produced. So you have to do something about it. And you can't just farm in the same way that you did previously because the climate is changing and the water condition, the temperatures is changing. So you have to find another way to survive. Otherwise, you can't produce enough fish to cope with the demand. And so another competitor is going to come in and get you. So what are you going to do? And I think the world is so interconnected. New Zealand, we produce our salmon fish in the sea farm. But as you can see in Denmark, they produce these fish in a tank, in a factory. If we have a natural disaster, if we have climate change, if we have all those things, Denmark is still going to survive because it's all covered. It's all protected. So I think it's looking at all the other traditional businesses, not one single one have not been affected by advanced technology because of Industry 4.0. So if people don't want to change because they think it's a hoax, I think just let it be. I don't think you can change their mind, unfortunately.
Right, right. Okay. Next question from Tika Nifardo, and he asked whether an accountant or an auditor nowadays doing the job using tools such as data scientists like R, Python, W, or other tools. And do you really think that we need to incorporate the software's mastery to the students, particularly to the undergraduate students in accounting?
This is do we have the chicken first or do we have the eggs first? So it's quite a challenging question in itself. And this is a question that every educator is asking. And I guess the question becomes, can we teach it well enough? And the answer is no, which becomes we need an interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary mindset. If you really want to learn Python, you really want to become a data scientist, to really understand it, you have to study accounting plus data science. That's the only way to do it. Accounting could give you enough basic. That's what accounting is. We can't produce data scientists from studying accounting, but we need to study a combination of those topics. So I guess the simplest answer is we may not need to change our curriculum completely and drastically, but we need to encourage students. The world is changing where you cannot survive with only one major. You have to do with minimum 2 majors, and ideally 3.
Oh, all right. So are you saying that perhaps in the very near future that the accounting may lose its relevance? So I mean, by starting just the basic of the accounting courses, for instance, and then equip other competencies with the IT competencies or the data analytics competencies may be sufficient for for the graduates to to excel in to be a good accountant, let's say it that way. Is it possible to do that?
It is possible if they have the what we call the digital acumen, to be more aware. Just because you're not an expert doesn't mean you don't know something exists. Now, most of us probably, if we want to, we can learn to bake a cake, but we would never claim that we are an expert baker. And to me, learning coding is the same. Learn enough so that you could make something for yourself, but not enough that you may have to run different business, being an expert.
Actually, so I have just to choose one of them. And for example, there is a question from Jafar Fauzi Baladraf. He asked how to deal with an entity that's not ready yet to work with this kind of automation, while our institution is quite well established in an automation accounting system. Should we back to old-fashioned one or push the entity into automation? So again, your advice is greatly needed on this particular
Can you
question.
repeat the question about the automation part?
Yeah.
Confused.
There is a company that is not yet ready to work with the automation in its accounting system, and I'm not very sure whether Jafar is asking the question on his role as the accountant, or I think as his role as the accountant. Yes. Should we back to old-fashioned one or push the entity into automation? He asked. I think he asked whether the company that he's currently working with should change their business process into automation, while others have already doing so?
That's a good question. The bottom line is the purpose of the automation is to make the business run more efficiently. That's the real reason why automation should take place. And we shouldn't automate for the sake of automating. Just because someone else is doing it doesn't mean you must do it if there's no need.
Right.
Which means that you have to automate for the right reason. Probably about 20 years ago, everyone was implementing SAP, implementing whatever ERP systems out there. And they're implementing it for the sake of implementing because their competitor across the road is implementing and they don't want to be left out. But if you ask them why they implemented it, they have no reason. They have no real desire, no real purpose. And that's the biggest problem that we will be facing when we come to robotic process automation or automation, full stop. And which is why we need to understand the bare minimum to understand what are the things that are happening so frequently that it is not adding value, and therefore we need to sort of repeatedly do it in a mechanical manner so that the humans don't have to do things that robots can do. But the problem is most accountants, if they don't have any understanding of coding and programming, they don't tend to see the value or see the opportunity where it can be automated. And that becomes a real danger. If you don't see the opportunity, then you become the problem to be replaced.
I see. Yes, to all the participants as well, if you would like to have an interactive discussion with Dr. Liu, just simply raise your hand and I'm just going to ask you to ask the questions directly to Dr. Liu. And okay, there is also another question from Maltreper. With the existence of blockchain, how do you see the future of accounting world as an accountant or auditor, since this technology is so advanced in recording or tracing transaction? So it's regarding the blockchain.
The problem with the blockchain is it's a lot more complicated than what it seems. Because the problem with the blockchain is people claim the blockchain is so perfect that nobody could break in and change the transaction or change the audit trail that's locked behind the blockchain. And as we know, this, it's a matter of time before somebody could actually crack and break it. Right. So that's also partly why blockchain has not taken up much faster compared to, for example, robotic process automation. Robotic process automation was probably something nobody had heard of more than 3 years ago. Now it's almost more and more people hear about it, but still not enough people hear about it. So when people say there are robots, and people still asking, we are the robots, and why aren't we changing curriculum where robots needs to be incorporated? And my answer is, you don't know the robots is in front of you until you've been replaced. Just like the GPS system, we still relying on things and gadgets without realizing it. And by the time we realize it, we've lost that human skills and human ability. And this is where the biggest problem is. So if we don't realize and start thinking that way, then we're going to be falling behind. Right. If we say changing the curriculum, it's not the full curriculum that needs to be changed. It's the thinking process of people that needs to be changed. When we talk about accounting standard, we have to think about how does this accounting standard mean in today's digital world, not the accounting standards back 20 years ago.
Right.
So it's the mindset, not necessarily the things on paper.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the mindset is the most difficult part to change. Yeah. There is also another...
Which is why I always laugh at it and say, who would you hire? A robot or a human? Yeah. I would hire a robot anytime without thinking.
Yes, yes. Regarding the curriculum, as you also mentioned earlier, regarding we don't need to change the whole curriculum. There should not be a radical change in the way we construct our curriculum. And there is a question from YK Feliana. As an academician, this is a very interesting topic, a very interesting question that I would like also ask this question as well. As academician, could you suggest some subjects or courses that should be included in accounting study program? And in order to prepare our grad students in the digital era.
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Yeah, regarding the curriculum, so are there any recommendation of the courses or the subjects that need to be included, or particular courses, particular subjects that need to be included in our undergraduate curriculum or the graduate curriculum? Let's say data analytics or ERP or audit, information system audit or whatever.
I think the biggest struggle we have is we could add more and more software tools into our curriculum, but are we producing the outcome that is required, as in the so-called fluency and acumen? The problem is, for many, many years, Excel is included in many accounting curriculum. But students learn Excel as in, what do I need to type? Where do I need to type? So we type equals sum equals the numbers or whatever the cells. And yet when you ask them, I need you to do an assignment using Excel. And what do you get in this particular spreadsheet? They type in the numbers and they grab the calculators and they add up the numbers and type the total number back into Excel. That is not understanding how to apply what you've learned. There's no digital fluency there. It is strictly, I learned to type a particular formula in a particular place when I've been told to do so.
I see.
So when you move away from the curriculum, they don't know when you should be using the sum function. And the sum function should be the bare minimum. So it's interesting to say, we teach them the thing in first year, or we teach them the thing in second year. Where is that thing that they learn in the subsequent time? So it's the mind. The mind is not willing to learn, and so they struggle to learn. And I think that is the biggest struggle and challenge that accounting students have, is the unwillingness to learn because they don't think it's relevant. And when you compare that to a computer science student, they've been told from day one, what you learn today will not be applicable tomorrow because another software is there. But your purpose of learning is to learn the concept, to learn the principle. You learn the principles so that the new tools come in, you could learn another tool quite quickly. And so a computer science graduate are used to learning and keep learning and keep learning. The only change now, even for them, is instead of upskilling and retraining every 5 years, they have to do that every year, minimum. So it's the pace that's changing. So until the minds of the accounting students start changing and say, I must learn, not because I don't see the relevance today, and I need to learn how to retain what I've learned to make it useful tomorrow when I'm not being told how to incorporate it. I think that's the biggest challenge. When do you see the sum function you've learned is useful? When do you see the if function that is useful? What is interesting is most students, when they graduate, don't even realize I could do a nested if inside an Excel cell. And what is a nested if? Never heard about it. Have they ever tried it? Even a simple if can't be constructed, then how are you going to learn all the other things? I think that people were asking, how am I going to learn macro? All you need to learn macro is know how to record it. So if you can record it, then you can look through the code to understand it. But the only thing the macro doesn't record is how to repeatedly do it for 10 times, 20 times, or unlimited number of times. So that becomes quite difficult to learn. But you need to learn the concept of saying, I'm doing step 1 to 5, and I'm repeatedly doing step 1 to 5 over and over and over again. Can we see that as a concept for minimum? Until you see that as a concept, you can't move on to the next level.
I see. So you suggested that the lifelong learning among the students need to be emphasized. The basic challenge now is that should we should we put this into a particular courses, or we just have to emphasize this and to build the student soft skills, and that would be enough, to build the the lifelong learning capacity of the students. The students don't have to or don't need to master a particular software or two softwares because the softwares may change, right? So the concept is what becoming important. So how can you incorporate this type of attribute, this type of lifelong learning, uh, you know, uh, traits among the students, among your students, for instance?
I think the only way to be eager and enthusiastic to learn is actually having that hunger and curiosity. If you're not curious about something, you wouldn't even think of learning about it. And that becomes quite challenging from that point of view. And I think that is probably the biggest challenge that a lot of accounting students face, is they're not used to having to keep learning, because accounting standards haven't changed for a long time. Often they're there for 10, 20 years, but if we look back in the last 5 years, accounting standards have changed quite quickly compared to the last 50 years, for example. So that becomes that pace of learning and the ability to learn in terms of that mind, that I need to keep learning or keep paying attention to the changes that I'm seeing in front of me.
I see.
Yeah. So it's paying attention and being more aware of it. And if you're not aware of it, you won't be curious and you won't be asking the question. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, now get back to EK question regarding the courses. Is it possible if we just add several, IT-based courses into our curriculum, and that should, complement the needs for IT-based competencies among the students? Is that would be sufficient for the students in order to prepare them to face the challenges or the prospects that they may encounter in the next 5 or 10 years?
I'm almost more inclined to say yes and no, in the sense that, we can add more IT courses, and then people will feel, why do I need to learn these things? And so the question becomes, why do I need to learn? Because to them, you would not appreciate you must learn it if you're still thinking about accounting back 20 to 50 years ago. So I think the first thing is to explain what accounting today looks like, not the accounting that you have heard from your parents or your grandparents 20 to 50 years ago. I think until you appreciate that, then whatever you put in front of the students to go, you must learn this, they would understand and appreciate, that's why I need to learn it. Because if you don't change your mind of saying where the world is today, and you're still thinking 20 to 50 years ago, then you don't see the urgency to learn and the need to learn.
All right. Okay. I'm just there are 20 more questions actually. Okay, guys, to all the participants, is there anyone here that would like to have an interactive discussion with Dr. Liu? Just simply raise your hand, and the question can be in Bahasa Indonesia if you like. or can be in English, and I will translate it on your behalf. Anyone? Otherwise, I'm just going to read all the questions here. Yeah, Taucita Ramadania, I think, yeah. Taucita, right? Taucita is one of our students. Taucita?
Hello.
Yes. Hello, yeah.
Hello, Dr. Liu. I'm Taucita Ramadania, and I'm a student from Diponegoro University. My question is, there's a very interesting subject in fintech right now, and there are so many areas that can be discovered. But why there's simply not enough what is called resource or measures that focusing in fintech. Is there any difficulties for us as the accountant or finance people to raise awareness or research in this field? Thank you. Do you catch my question?
Yeah. I think the question is more to do with, okay, fintech, it's growing, it's changing, and yet when we look at it from a research point of view, we know very little, and there's still more to know. So in many ways, there are actually more opportunities and more room when we come to talking about research opportunities, thinking about what else can we learn and what else can we discover and what else can we find out about. And which is something handy from a university point of view, because university is about doing research. And right now, if we look and think about all the different accounting departments around the world in terms of research, most of the accounting research is still, and we're talking about 99.9%, is still traditional accounting topics. Where does the digital element or the digital factor or the digitalness is incorporated in? The only time you'll see anything to do with digital connection or overlapping with accounting is if you go outside of accounting. You go into accounting information systems, you'll see far more about it, or even if you go to information systems, they'll be happy to look at that irrespective of the discipline. So there's a lot more to learn about it. So it's quite interesting when you want to learn more about these things that not many people, not many of us know enough about. Where do we find the information? I could tell you won't find it in traditional accounting research. And that becomes quite a challenging one, as in we need to look far and beyond the field. And that becomes quite challenging when trying to develop material for students or for students to learn is you have to pay attention. One thing that I'm always sort of remember, one of the interview participant who told me, basically the bottom line is I could tell you 1 in 25 recent graduate would pay attention with the amount of material newsletter or any updates when it talks about the digitalness or the digital changes within their Big Four firm. And 1 in 25 is already a big stretch. Some companies you were really talking about 1 in 50 of recent graduates. And these are the better students who managed to get into the firm. So they have the resources and they're not looking. And most of these Big Four firms have special groups, special people, dedicated people who research on these topics. So when you're given these materials, do you pay attention? Do you do your own research to keep up and read up about it and learn more about it? Which also means that the challenge right now that we face is we can't rely on the materials that we see in our textbook because they're becoming out of date quite quickly. And a lot of textbook publishers do realize that. And so they try to supplement it by adding new materials such as case study, more examples online to supplement the printed copy of the textbook that's already been published. So that means that you have to learn, and there are more details that needs to be added in, which comes to the point that Staff members have to keep retraining and upskilling and keep up with the changes of what's going. Students need to be aware. What I learned last month may no longer be the only most relevant stuff last month because their new stuff might have come in this month. So as a student, you have to pay more attention on the newspaper and the media and industries, because that gives you a good flavor of what is happening around the world and at what point it's going to come to me or affect me, because the world is so interconnected that what happens in another company in another country yesterday, we might hear about it today in our country.
Right.
So I'm not sure whether I answer your question, but it's a long way around, but hopefully I've given you some ideas of how to overcome it, maybe.
I think it answers the questions, Dr. Liu. Okay, there is also an interesting question. I'm not very sure whether this question has been addressed or not, but I think I just okay. You said earlier that robotic people can do programming without the code, and isn't it better if accountants focus on their fields, which is accounting, and let the robot do that code? So it means that what Martinez asked here, we don't need to learn about the data analytics and so on and so forth on the IT-based competencies. And let's just focus on our accounting. Let's just focus on what we do best, which is accounting, and let the robots do their code on something like that. What do you think about the statement from Martinez here?
It's a good question. And I'll probably think about it as being, should you cook at home or should you always eat out? Because there are much better cooks out there, better chefs out there who specialize in cooking and could deliver a far better meal than you would ever be able to deliver. And the answer is, but you still have to cook because you can't just eat out every day, every meal. And I think that's the same thing when we come to accounting is, do we need to learn data analytics? Do we need to learn automation? The answer is yes. We just need to learn enough in order to survive, but we're not going to learn too much to become an expert. And if you want to become an expert, do another second major and third major or double major, we call it, or triple major. So that's basically where I would basically say you have to learn it so that you could at least read and understand it. You may not be able to produce it, but at least you could appreciate it, which comes down to the visualization, for example. Accountants are used to looking at data. But if you don't know how to analyze the bare minimum in terms of dealing with the data and understand how do I can plug in the digital tool in order to make these data explain a story to me, then you're going to fall behind. Because companies are preferring to use the data tools to actually get insights or get understanding of what the data are saying and explaining how the company is operating. So accountants can't see the numbers anymore. They have to produce it in a picture in order to communicate. And it's quite fascinating to look at some of these pictures as well, because when you look at the pictures, you look at the whole trend as in things that you may not have considered. For example, if we want to look at transactions and we run through all the transactions and we just say, draw me a graph about the transaction of when the transaction was posted between when the order is, a purchase order is put into the system versus when the purchase order is actually with the goods arrive versus when the purchase order is eventually being paid, because they are three different status and we can calculate the time. The proper system, if that was the way the company is operating, there should be a time delay between each of these status and not immediately within 2 seconds. So you put an order in, the next moment you say the goods arrive, and the next moment you say you could pay for it. That usually suggests we have a fraud. So that is understanding where accounting meets with the digital to help you put the picture of what this transaction or all the different transaction is happening inside my company. Can I look at the transaction as to the authorization of the purchase order in terms of releasing the payments? When are the hours of these approvals? Are they 3 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock at night or between my working hours, which is where I'm expecting my employees to be processing and approving the payments? And that's what we talk about in terms of understanding the data, but putting a picture together. Do we have an issue? I don't need to look at it line by line. But if I look at the summary in terms of a trend by the hour, I will see if I have an issue straight away. And I can start asking the question according to that, because that means it is not part of the normal trend, because it will stand out as being something completely outside the normal.
I see. And this also leads to a question from Teresia Dwi Astuti. She is, if I'm not mistaken, she is a vice director of Unica. And she asked whether, she just read an article that in the next 5 years, accounting work will be replaced by robots. So if this really happens, how do we change our curriculum so that accounting is not extinct, but is it possible if we change our work model? And just would like to give you a slight introduction of our curriculum. The curriculum in Indonesia and in New Zealand may have several differences. We do not acknowledge the presence of major or minor, so we just have one block of courses in curriculum in accounting, for instance. So the students do not have the flexibility to take minor courses or minor concentration in other programs or in other departments. So in order to respond so this can be used as the basis for you to respond to Teresia's questions. So how should the curriculum be changed so that our work is still relevant, so that accounting is still relevant, not only in the next 5 years, but in the next 10 years or next 15 years, we can maintain our curriculum, we can maintain the relevance of accounting.
I think what is interesting is, I think for the next 2-3 years, and I wouldn't say more than 3 years, every university will have to rethink, how am I going to deliver education? How am I going to survive after COVID-19? It's a real question. What sort of materials and delivery am I going to deliver? Because if I don't do something different or rethink what I'm delivering, I may not be able to retain my customer, as in my students, because they'll go somewhere else. For example, micro-credential is a real issue at the moment, because to do micro-credential, you could do it online. You can learn another curriculum, you can learn something else somewhere else around the world. I don't have to go to university, full stop.
I see.
A lot of big companies around the world, for example, Amazon, Google, all these bigger companies, including Big Four, actually, the issues they face is they don't have enough of the right people who have the right skill. And so they themselves are now developing their own university, what we call home brand university. And so they are actually producing what we call the new collar workers, as in another new breed of workers that they self-breed, as in they produce themselves for the right needs. And that means that education is changing around the world, around all sectors, in the sense that, do we still deliver university study in a 3-year or 4-year model? Have we been disrupted? Many companies around the world, and I understand Brazil does this quite a bit, even with their big four firms, with their recent graduates, and they've done that for the last 20 years, apparently, is they hire graduates before they graduate, and they don't hire them halfway through. They hire them literally in the first year of their study. And often these students in their first year study because they were hired and they work full-time for the company. So their so-called undergraduate study is no longer the priority. It's no longer full-time. If you have a full-time job with one of the top companies, why will you need to finish your study? So that becomes a changing game between educated sector, compared to big firms that could train their own staff and have enough training resources and training materials and have their own educator and instructor available to train. And so that becomes a really, really challenging one because companies can produce it. So if we say we're still going to do the things the same way we did 20, 50, 100 years ago, I'm not sure whether we could survive, given that companies themselves are saying, if university are not producing the graduates that I need, I'm going to produce my own graduate. And I'm going to produce it in less time, far less time, because all I need the workers. I don't need to care about the progression or the career aspiration of the workers. I only need them to do the bare minimum of the work I need them for. And if I'm finished with them, I could terminate them, as in no longer hire them. I fire them. And I hire another new breed of workers who could do the work that I need. So companies are actually changing that recruitment and hiring model. They hire the people that they think they could train, and they will train them themselves. They're not relying on university to produce the graduates anymore. So that's something to be very, very careful about, that a lot of firms are starting to go into that model, and they're still playing with that model. But you can imagine the bigger firms like Amazon and Google and the big four can afford that and can do that.
See. All right, Doctor, other questions. This one comes from my colleague, Prof. Anissa Reddy. Which one is the most important thing for accounting education? Should we provide the students with the ability to use the software for data analytics and decision making, or should we equip students with the ability in computer coding and programming? So if we have to choose either data analytics, or we should emphasize more on data analytics and decision making instead of coding and programming. So which one do you go for?
If you have to choose, I will say it this way. Most universities have already moved and follow and got on to the bandwagon of producing data analytics sort of curriculum in there. Right. They've already started incorporating it. So that's not something new. If we're looking at the US universities within the accounting department, I wouldn't say less than 50%. I don't know the exact number, but I know that's part of the curriculum. So that's definitely. When it comes to automation, that's a different story, because that's still a new market. That's still quite new compared to data analytics. So some universities have started in this journey and have started thinking about getting into this space. So a lot of them have gone into that space, but be careful. Some universities have gone into automation from the IT people in terms of managing their own efficiency. When it comes to educating and incorporating the automation, for example, RPA, robotic process automation, that's still quite new, but quite a few universities are doing that and incorporating that. So which comes to, do you want to catch up with what the world is already doing and starting to doing, which is data analytics, or do you want to provide a new angle, a new competitive advantage? If that was the case, then I would probably go the automation. And when I say automation, and when I say learning coding and programming, the way the tools are working, we have robotic process automation tools that are available in 2020 that requires non-programmer to use these tools to code and make robots. That's where we are at in 2020. That wasn't the case in 2015. You still have to do the hard coding. So now we have a world where we can teach automation, teach coding to non-programmer just to get them up to speed to do the bare minimum. So that's where the world is changing into. So there are quite a few companies in that space. So if you look up Gartner in terms of robotic process automation, you'll see a few key tools that are available. And so some of the software vendors already quite aggressively trying to sell their products to the university. For example, Blue Prisms, that's been around for a bit longer, and Automation Anywhere, that's been quite popular in the US. And now we've got another player that's been quite strong, is UiPath. So those are the automation tool in terms of learning how to code without becoming a hard code coder.
Right. All right. Actually, there are many other questions, Dr. Liu, but I'm just going to skip to randomly the question from Juliana, and she asked a question in Bahasa Indonesia. So if I may translate it, in this IT era, will it also affect the change in the accounting principles as well and standards? So how do you foresee this issue?
This is interesting because if we think about cybersecurity, that would be one that is affecting it. Because in the sense that integrated reporting, what I'm talking about annual reporting, companies are being asked more and more to report on their data privacy in terms of what would happen if a data breach have happened, what would they do, what would they require to do, and what sort of protection in terms of protecting private information if a company database becomes attacked or something like that. And more companies are under legal requirements that they must disclose and actually tell the world if there had been a data breach. And universities are no different. For example, I think it was just only last year, Australian National University, ANU, had a data breach, and they had to tell everyone that had a record in their database for the last 20 years that there had been a data breach, that your data may have been details data or data relating to your address or any of your private information may have been leaked out. So that's quite a bit of a what sort of reporting, what sort of changing from that standards, because now when you report as an annual report, it's no longer just about the numbers and the financial. You have to report on other things that causes a risk on the company.
I see. Any questions from audience for interactive discussions with Dr. Liu? Just simply raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm just going to read, and I'm just going to read one last questions. Other questions will be sent to email to Dr. Liu. Any questions? Because it's already 13:15 here in Indonesia, and I think it's almost 6:15 in Auckland, right? 6 p.m. So I think Dr. Liu needs her dinner, and this is her dinner time, I think. The one last question, Dr. Liu, from me that I chose randomly. It's regarding the the automation. The accounting automation focuses on the entire accounting life cycle, and so you also mentioned earlier that this definitely affect the way management accounting does, right? And there is an author from Kaplan and Johnson maintain that state that the relevance loss of management accounting, bridging the gap between the accounting practice and the theory. So if you see this accounting automation have already taken place in practice, do you really think that we are left behind about this? The accounting education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we're left behind yet, because right now the automation are still quite primitive, in the sense that what we're trying to do is get rid of the mundane tasks, the tasks that humans just dislike anyway. So, for example, I'll give you an example of what a typical robotic process automation that's happening, especially in terms of between the IA space, intelligent automation space. For example, you could submit an expense. So you've got a receipt and you took a photo of your receipt using your phone. So you send your image and you upload it. And what happens behind the scene? Basically, they need to scan this image, but they need to convert it, the image, in terms of the details, the data on this image, telling how much you spend and what items you spend it on and which supplier the spending have been done from. So that's converting by scanning that photo image and converting to a digital data, so that we can store the data that you spend $5 on a cup of coffee from which coffee shop. And then you put it inside the transaction of your bookkeeping and update it to that. Now, if we stop and think about it, how many of you like sitting there and entering the fact that you have spent $5 on a coffee and you have to code it to a particular account code in your ledger account? If I can get a robot to do that all automatically just by me taking a photo of it, which I have to do it anyway, even in the old days, but I could save a lot of extra hassle of that simple thing. Now, if we take the next step and go, what are the big four firms using this RPA for? And that's exactly what they've done. They've done it by, here's a robot, it will go through my system to pick up on all the contracts to do with this client. So if I finish an audit work, I need to produce an invoice and I need to send it to the client. But how many of us want to spend 2 hours to look through all the documents, to pull out all the total hours that all my staff member has charged, chargeable hours on, and multiply it by the hours spent in terms of hourly rate for each individual workers, and then adding it up and putting it into an invoice and sending it off to the audit clients? That's what we call, in terms of non-valued added work that the humans need to spend time on.
Right.
So instead of a manager doing it, they could ask their first year graduate to do it. But again, because it contains so many confidential information, and if you get it wrong, you'll be charging your audit client wrong and you'll get the wrong money back. So it's actually safer to get the robots to do it. Instead of spending 2-3 hours, which I have to sit down and do it, I can press a button and it's done, and I've got the invoice ready to be attached, or even automatically attached and sent off to the audit client. So that's what robotic process automation currently is doing, as an example, and that's where we're at.
Right. And this definitely may change the way accounting or the business process in the very near future, right?
Which means you have to understand the business processes. If you don't understand the process of the invoicing and where you get all the different rates and multiply it, and how do you deal with the profit side or the extra earnings side or whatever, and the ledger as to where all the expenses are hidden. If you don't understand that, how do you actually robotically automate that? And so you can't rely on an IT person to do it. So you really need to talk to the IT person to do so. So the more you understand it from an accounting point of view, what you manually have to do, and you have to think, how can I automate it by getting a robot to engage to do so? Then it moves it to the next space, the opportunity. And you'll be interesting to find out that very few graduates can even think of, oh, do you have to do that? Why do you have to do that manually? Why do you have to spend 2-3 hours just to look up all these documents? And sometimes people have got their own little robots that code it to go through the emails to create all these emails of all the requests for purchases. I could automate that and create purchase order to be entered into my ERP system. That's the example of robotic process automation in 2020. So there's still a lot to be automated.
Right. So, but this may also decrease the accounting workforce by maybe 50%, 60%, 70%, right? But this is very possible, given the fact that the accounting students in Indonesia here is, and in Undip is 1,000 accounting undergraduate students. And yeah, but this is a challenge. Definitely, this is a challenge that we need to face and need to find a way out about this issue. And Dr. Leo, there are other questions, but I'm afraid that very nice discussion, very interesting topic, and you opened our eyes, you opened our perspective, and there are a lot of things that need to be done, particularly among the lecturers. And I do believe that 40% of the audience here are the lecturers, and while others are from practitioners as well. From BPK. BPK is the investigative auditors from the government. Also, some of them around 80 or 70 or 80, like, if I'm not mistaken, registered for this event. And I would like to conclude this, this accounting forum, but there are too many things that I would like to say. And I think that Dr. Liu just delivered the forum very well. That no need for me to recap everything. But she mostly said that the world is changing, so accounting as well will also change. So we have to move. So we have to rethink. We have to reconstruct our curriculum, and we have to prepare our students in order to face the industrial revolution, or the fourth industrial revolution, in the very near future. And I think that's it from me. And I think I'm just going to give this session back to Brenda. Brenda? Thank you, Dr. Liu.
And thank you very much for having me. Hopefully I'm not scaring everyone off, that there's still opportunities and new ventures to come, but you need to see the opportunity in order to catch it, in order to go with the wave. So don't be left behind.
Yeah, it's a little bit scary though. It's a little bit, but it's very interesting. So we have to, we have to be ready, like it or not. Okay, but thank you very much, Dr. Liu. Brenda, just going to give it back the forum to you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Liu, for such a valuable and useful material. Also, thank you, Dr. Fuad, for being the moderator of this seminar. Ladies and gentlemen, we have learned that there are a number of technologies that affect the roles of accounting professionals, and there are still more to come. By understanding this, it is hoped that we can have new insight on how IT and artificial intelligence are shaping the future of accounting. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to the end of today's seminar. On behalf of the Accounting Forum Committee, we would like to thank everyone involved, including all participants that have taken this seminar very well. And once again, I would like to thank our special guest speaker, Dr. Liu, our honorable moderator, Dr. Fuad, also Professor Dr. Suharnomo, Dr. Pujiarto, and Mr. Agung Juliarto.
Thank you, Brenda. Dr. Liu, thank you very much. Thank you very much, and we'll keep in touch after this. Thank you very much, Dr. Liu.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bapak Ibu sekalian, atas nama Fakultas Ekonomika dan Bisnis Universitas Diponegoro, Pak Dekan masih ada ya? Pak Dekan kayaknya sedang keluar deh. Atas nama Fakultas Ekonomika dan Bisnis, terima kasih atas kehadirannya. Insya Allah nanti kita akan bertemu di accounting forum berikutnya. We still have several forums to go. Our next accounting forum will be in the mid of August, and this forum will invite Prof. Tarmizi Ahmad and Dr. Tarko Sunario from the head of Indonesian Public Accountant. And we are going to be discussing on the change needed, particularly the change of the auditors' competencies to face the forthcoming future, something like that. But just to give you a slight information that the next series will be held on mid of August. Thank you very much again. Thank you very much, Dr. Liu. Terima kasih semuanya. Pak Dekan sudah ada. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Like I said to you.
Yeah, I said to Dr. Liu before that if this COVID-19
over,
finish,
just come.
we are going to invite her to Semarang, and then we are also going to New Zealand as well. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Alright.
Thank you very much.
Thank you ya.
Thank you.
Bapak Ibu semuanya, terima kasih. Pak Dekan, terima kasih banyak ya.
Sama-sama.
Terima kasih Bapak Ibu. Kita akan tutup. We are going to end the session. Thank you very much, and don't forget to fill up your post test, because the post test will be used for the certificates, and the post test will also be used as just to make sure that no free riders is accepted in our webinar. Okay, saya akhiri semuanya. Thank you very much again. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon all. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Dr. Liu. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Prof. Liu.
Brenda, saya kembalikan ke Brenda ya.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Fuad, for the information. And before ending up this seminar, to all participants, please be informed that there will be a post test, which will be sent in the meeting chat. And it should be noted that certificates will only be given to those who get score with a minimum of 50. And thank you all for such a great seminar. I am Brenda, as the master of ceremony of this seminar. See you all on the next accounting forum. Thank you and have a good day.
Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, you can leave this meeting, Dr. Liu. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Our staff will contact you. Thank you.